today, I'm always excited for these interviews. We never know who we're gonna get on the show, and today we're kind of grassroots. We're homegrown. It's an amazing person that we're talking to today. He is, the benefactor of the trust fund, Jared Silberkleit, and we're
Wow, you actually pronounced it correctly. That almost never happens.
I said it in the mirror like 100 times before you came on, but
Oh, I hope you did.
we're super happy to have you here. Couldn't be a nicer guy. I know that we're not supposed to talk about that, but I want to.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's another rarity.
Well, I want to kind of break this. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I get right into it. I'm sorry, I just get excited. But so, Jared, we're no stranger to Northeast Wrestling. We are based out of Poughkeepsie, New York, where Northeast has ran a plethora of times. We're also, really near where all the shows run, but. You currently are the benefactor, as we mentioned. So, could you
Yes, sir.
you kind of introduce yourself a little bit to people who may not know you? Just give us, just kind of the brief rundown as what you're doing currently with Northeast Wrestling.
Well, hello, listeners. I am, as you just mentioned, Trust Fund benefactor Jared Silberkleit, and that's Silberkleit. And right now, in Northeast Wrestling, I have been managing there since mid-2017. I have managed what you know as wrestlers, but what I term assets. And in the past, I represented Wrecking Ball Legursky, and most recently, the One-Man Thrill Ride, and Ron Zombie for the past about a year throughout most of 2019. Although not the last Northeast Wrestling event that took place, but the last one I was at, Autumn Ambush, back in October, there was a split. Thrill Ride decided to go off on his own, and I believe Ron may have joined him. So as of this moment, I'm off the radar right now. I'm kind of in reset mode. So I'm still working with Northeast Wrestling, very much so. But as far as when, where, and how I'm going to return and who I will be representing in the future, that right now is up in the air. But I have been using my father's trust fund money to purchase wrestlers. Thankfully, pretty much nobody is off limits for me. And over the last couple of years, I've been active at ringside, sometimes in the ring. I have competed in matches on certain special occasions. Unfortunately, usually any physicality between me and any of the wrestlers usually ends up with me coming on the short end of the stick.
Well, that's the now. That's where you are now. But let's go back a little bit. We wouldn't be doing our journalistic duties if we didn't go back in time a little bit. So let's go back. Let me ask the question to you. When do you think the first memory you have of professional wrestling is?
Well, I am unlike many who get involved in professional wrestling. You hear from so many people in the business and the industry that they were fans since the day they were born. One of their first television memories was watching WWF television or something like that. I didn't really start watching wrestling religiously until I was a teenager. I didn't start watching on a regular basis until about 2007. I mean, when I was a little kid, I lived in Stamford when I was really young, from about age 5 to 9, and I remember seeing the old now WWE, former WWF headquarters. And it's funny because I remember, asking my mom if I could go there because I thought that that's where they held all the wrestling shows. And not only did she explain to me that wasn't the case, but she also thought that wrestling was like barbaric and wouldn't let me watch it. So I had to wait till I was a little bit older, and I kind of fell out of it, but then fell back into it. Started watching when I was like 13, and it was around that time I remember watching, those AM Raw reruns they would show around 1 a.m. on Saturdays. I remember seeing a Shawn Michaels Kurt Angle match that really got my attention. And it's funny because although I obviously kind of fell into the more theatrical and speaking aspect of professional wrestling. What initially drew me in was more of the pure in-ring storytelling and athleticism.
Awesome. So you mentioned Shawn Michaels, mentioned Kurt Angle. Is it safe to say that those were some of your favorites growing up, or did you have favorites? How did you kind of get? Because even though you've been physical in the ring, you are more of a, I'll say, like manager type. So
of course, so absolutely.
So did you? Obviously, you're drawn to like the athleticism, but who were some of the people that kind of made you say like, oh wow, this would be something that maybe I'd like to do?
Well, it's interesting because I initially didn't start in wrestling as a manager. I actually started as a ring announcer, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but some of my early inspirations for I was drawn to promo segments for sure. So guys like Shawn Michaels, John Cena, Edge, because these are guys that were on top at the time when I started watching, really captivated my attention. Triple H a little bit as well. But because, again, I wanted to get in it initially for the announcing, the person that I emulated my voice after, or at least attempted to, were more of like the Howard Finkel and Justin Roberts, actually, because I first got into, wrestling as far as performing on events when I was about 17 as a ring announcer and interviewer. I didn't start managing again until just a couple of years ago. And it was at that point where I was always a fan of Paul Heyman's work with Brock Lesnar, which was such a natural transition for me because the first person I started working with was Wrecking Ball Legursky. And I like to think that we were kind of like in that same vein, the manager monster pairing. So Heyman was definitely a big one for me.
Awesome. Now, we know that you're now involved, but then you were 13. You were just kind of getting back into wrestling. How far did your fandom go? Were you going to the shows? Were you wearing the shirts in school? A quick story for me is that I grew up kind of during the Attitude Era. That was a time when obviously we all got in trouble for telling our teachers to suck it and wearing the Austin 316 shirts. So how involved were you in wrestling back then? And, when did you kind of get bit by the bug, as they say, to decide that maybe this is something that you'd like to do?
Well, as far as a fan, now you just mentioned you had the benefit of, being a fan during the Attitude Era, being a little older at that time, when it was kind of more, I guess, more mainstream and you saw more wrestling shirts out in public and, at school and whatnot. And it wasn't like that at my high school really at all. I kind of got lucky in that I found my kind of niche group of friends at high school who did like wrestling, because nowadays, I think it's a lot easier now than it was 10 years ago to spot wrestling fans out in public, just because I think we're in the midst of another, boom period, and they're starting to kind of come out of the woodwork. But around that 2007, 2008, 2009 period, it's almost like when you found a wrestling fan, you were like, oh, all right, I found someone. So I kind of found my group of friends in high school from ages like 13 to 16 who were also into it. And yes, we did go to live events. I went to WWE shows a lot in Connecticut, and the first pay-per-view I went to was Hell in a Cell 2009 over at the Prudential Center in New Jersey. That was like a birthday present. And when I was younger, I always wanted to get into sports announcing. I had done like some PA announcing for Little League and stuff like that. And basically I found out through the Battle Brothers, actually, from Northeast Wrestling, because the Battles were family friends of one of my close friends at high school, actually several of those guys. And through my high school friends, I met the Battles, who informed me about this independent company called CTWE, which ran the what's now the NEW Arena, Bethany Town Hall over in Bethany, which was one of my hometowns, one of my high school towns. My high school was three towns in Connecticut. So anyway, long story short, I got to meet the promoter, and reiterated my interest to get into announcing, and he let me ring announce. And I got involved with CTWE, became a regular over there. I shared ring announcing duties and interviewer duties for about 2 to 3 years over there. And when that company closed its doors, Northeast Wrestling took over that building, and then I joined up with NEW in that same sort of role.
Now CTWE, we some of us that have been in the area for a while know that had some big names come through there. So we had Daniel Bryan, Low Key came through there, and a lot of people that you're talking about that are now in Northeast Wrestling. So for you, when you started to do that, was it something that you said, like, I'm hooked now, like there's no way that I can ever do anything else? Or was it still kind of like growing pains and learning how to do it and really hone your craft? Like, because like you said, you started out kind of doing announcing. At that point, was that kind of what you felt like that's what you're going to stay? Or is it something that you were like, I think I could grow into maybe being more of a, quote unquote, like on-air talent?
I'll be honest, at that time, during the period I was with CTWE, I never viewed myself as really going to pursue wrestling as something that I could do full time or potentially make a living at. I always viewed it as kind of, it's a really cool thing that there's a local wrestling show in one of my hometowns, in the same town where I see all my friends and whatnot. And, I never left the state of Connecticut during those few years. I worked for a couple other groups like Wrestle Jam, but for the most part, I didn't travel really. I kind of just did the announcing. I thought it was a good way to kind of keep my public speaking skills fresh. I was starting college around that time because I graduated high school in 2011 and went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting after that, and started my 4-year shortly after. So it really was just kind of something I was doing on the side that was kind of like, I'm a big fan of wrestling, and I also get to do this stuff for this local independent and be involved. But I really never had envisioned myself becoming as much of an on-air talent as I have become now. It was really not until Northeast Wrestling, because the events were bigger and they traveled out of state frequently, that kind of broadened my horizons. Like, there's a whole wrestling world out there that I had never even had the idea to explore, really.
Now, working for Northeast Wrestling, we know that again, some of the greatest talent ever comes through there, and we could sit here pretty much all day and talk about some of the greats that come through there. So when you started kind of working for Northeast Wrestling, was it hard to not like realize how big of a company that really was, and like how big these stars were coming through there?
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely had my moments of getting starstruck just because I wasn't fully used to at that time being in some of those locker rooms or backstage with a lot of the talent that you just mentioned. I mean, guys like the Hardys and Ric Flair, Mick Foley, Jimmy Hart, knowing that guys like Hulk Hogan had been there in the past, Roddy Piper, Alberto Del Rio from that period, I believe around 2015. Guys like that, it definitely was something to get acclimated to at first, just because at CTWE we did have some name talent, and I think that they kind of, CTWE in its final years kind of laid the groundwork for what would become when Northeast Wrestling would take over that building full time. But it was kind of something like where you would see one guy like that at a CTWE show on occasion, you'd be like, ooh, but then NEW, when you look around, some of these locker rooms, and you can't believe at first who's there. But it was something that I got used to, thankfully. I think it was important to get used to that sort of thing before embarking on this managerial journey, because the more that I was around them, that it's like they become, your colleagues, your peers, and you're working with them in segments and stuff like that. So, I was thankful that in the years prior to that, I kind of got that starstruck bug out of my system, to where it's like, okay, now I'm ready to, get down to business.
Well, you just mentioned that, you're sharing the locker room with some of these people, and, nowadays we have the advent of the WWE Network,
Yeah.
DVDs. You can kind of go back and hone in on some of these characteristics, these mannerisms of people. When you decided to kind of take that leap from just being a ring announcer or helping out, however, and then thinking I may try to do this managing thing. Did you do your homework? Did you go back and see anybody and say, like, you know what, I'm going to try to kind of maybe emulate this a little bit, or I like this, I'm going to add a little bit of that, or whatever. Obviously there's been some very historic managers over the years in all different promotions. I'm just wondering if you did that, if you went back and kind of looked at some of those people.
Well, Paul Heyman was definitely somebody who I think I'd be lying if I said he wasn't on the brain during my initial foray into managing back around mid-2017. I always tried to do my own thing. I have prided myself on, when I do, I guess, my version of like tape study when it comes to getting promo ideas or character ideas, I try to stay away from wrestling as much as I can, because I find that, tape study in wrestling is phenomenal for, in-ring talent and, if you're a wrestler, right? But I've always found like that in the promo department, and there are definitely things that you can learn from, but for me, I always thought that if I study too many wrestling promos for my promo content, I'm either A, going to wind up copying somebody, or B, I'm going to fall into those wrestling tropes, those wrestling isms, those wrestling cadences that I've always tried to like shy away from. I've always tried to draw my inspiration from, I've always thought of it like, when you see any form of public speaking in any form of entertainment, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I'm talking movies, television shows, music, press conferences, interviews, sports talk shows. To me, any unbroken period of speech is a promo. And like those outside sources, to me, I thought that if I can draw from cherry pick from some of that content, that's going to help me stand out that much more, because they're not going to be like, oh, he's just another wrestling manager, he's this stereotype.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those businesses where you think that that it would be easy to come up with something new, but then you realize that it's been around for so long that sometimes it's very difficult to find your own style. So kudos on you for trying that. And so you're here in Northeast Wrestling. You are the benefactor of the trust fund.
Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier, you've had some ups and downs. So I'm sure a man like you is not going to just lay out what's going to happen in the future. But with such great talent in Northeast Wrestling and beyond, what are you looking for whenever you try to add somebody to the trust fund?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because you're always thinking about chemistry. You're always thinking about, you want to challenge yourself by working with different types of characters. But you also, you want to find that spark, and you're not always going to have the same spark with everybody. But I think what the biggest thing for me to get over was, at first at least, was when I first started managing, I was just with Wrecking Ball Legursky. It was only me and him, and Brian Malonis came into the fold a little bit later when he was added to the faction back around early 2018. So that was a second person. But Wrecking Ball was still my full-time guy on every show from mid-2017 to mid-2018. And it almost felt a little awkward for me working with other people at first, because I was used to, like, I almost wasn't as comfortable in my own skin, and I was like Wrecking Ball's manager, and now I kind of had to take that leap to become like, my own person, a manager that can go with almost anybody. And the dynamic, manager and monster with Wrecking Ball versus what I had with Thrill Ride, who obviously wasn't a guy who needed me to do his promos for him. We complemented each other nicely. So I think that experience has kind of opened my eyes to working again with like different types of characters. And I look for guys who have that desire and who have, for one, a certain uniqueness about them, work ethic and talent, and someone who's going to challenge me to be the best I can be. Because that's how I felt in working with Thrill Ride. We kind of, obviously our relationship kind of went off the rails back in October. But prior to that, what I really liked the most about working with Thrill Ride was that when our promos were joint, they were almost 50-50 in a way when we were both in front of the camera. And he is so talented. He's so talented on the mic. I can't take that away from him. And it kind of, made me want to up my game. And I love being inspired by other talent to kind of get up to their level. They're being the best wrestler they can be. I have to be the best manager I can be.
Well, I know that you've had a lot of amazing moments in Northeast Wrestling and beyond. So what would you consider, like right now, the maybe top 3 moments of your career so far?
The top 3 moments of my career. I'm going to have to go in no particular order here. But the first one that comes to mind has to be the match that I had against Flip Gordon last summer at the event was called Long Live the King at the NEW Arena. This was my second ever full-length singles match. First one I'm actually going to talk about next. But this was me versus Flip. It was the culmination of a storyline where basically Flip had ended Wrecking Ball's undefeated streak when he defended the title against him 3 months prior. And then I negotiated for a rematch where if Flip beat Wrecking Ball again, then Flip would get 5 minutes alone in the ring with me. And I interfered, costing Flip the match, helping Wrecking Ball win, and as a result, Michael Lombardi put me in a singles against Flip with Mike himself as the referee. And to me, it was just such a different challenge for me because I'd been a manager to this point, just having my moments here and there within matches, but this was me actually, center stage as a wrestler for, really this was the most substantial as far as anything that's been asked of me from an in-ring perspective, and to get in there with Flip, with where he's at nowadays. That's something that I'll always have that memory, and just feeling the utter disdain and hatred from the crowd on that night, and then the explosion when I got my comeuppance from not only Flip but from Michael as well. It was a very special night for me, and I kind of surprised myself with what I was capable of, in my opinion. So that is something that I'll definitely never forget. Another one would be, if I had to think about it, top 3. It's challenging to do a top 3, right? The month prior, actually, this is also in 2018, was me versus Hornswoggle from WWE. This was my first official match. And this was the entire segment. The way this came together was also pretty interesting because Wrecking Ball had a gauntlet, an open challenge gauntlet. He beat 2 guys, and then Mick Foley came out almost kind of like he was going to be that third guy to challenge Wrecking Ball. And we had a little back and forth in the ring. This was at Six Flags Great Adventure. This was the first of what seems to be an annual event that Northeast Wrestling is going to be holding at that park. And Mick Foley actually brings out Hornswoggle to not wrestle Wrecking Ball, but wrestle me. And, the two of us had a match. And this is something that I didn't find out until pretty much right then and there. Had little to no advanced knowledge that anything like this could have been happening. And that was, again, one of those moments where I never would have envisioned myself in that situation. I'm in a match with Hornswoggle, and Mick Foley's at ringside. And again, the reaction from the people was everything that we could have hoped it would have been. So that was pretty surreal. And number three, that I almost wish I could do a number 4, but I think a number 3 for me would be probably back at WrestleFest of this year, where we had the Trust Fund, myself, Thrill Ride, and Ron Zombie against Wrecking Ball, Legursky, and Bully Ray. And this was, again, another culmination of a long-term story that we had been a part of for several months after Wrecking Ball had turned on me. And for however many months, I think it was all the way from September 2018 through March of 2019, or actually this event would have been in late April, I had been sending guy after guy at Wrecking Ball, trying to beat him, and Wrecking Ball kept winning. And finally we have this tables match that ends with me going through a table, Wrecking Ball splashing me through it at WrestleFest in front of, I think it was either sold out or near sold out crowd in Danbury, in a building that Northeast Wrestling has held many historic events in over the years. And again, I could just feel the fact that the crowd was invested not only in the match, but in the overarching story. And we put together a wonderful video package highlighting everything from beginning to end, actually put together by your podcast co-producer, Steve Perito. So a big shout out to him. But that was just, I love seeing stories come full circle. And I think that that's kind of the theme of all of my favorite memories here in NEW.
Well, you didn't just, lend your services to NEW. You also went to what many have called, the third biggest company, the fourth, it kind of staggers around there every now and then, but you went to Ring of Honor. So what was that experience like for you moving from Northeast to Ring of Honor?
The opportunities that I got with Ring of Honor this year, I'm very, very grateful for, and I'm hoping that they'll, hopefully it means that more big things will be on the horizon for me in the near future in wrestling. And it's crazy how they came about. I made my first appearance for them in a dark match before their event in Baltimore. This was about 1 week before the week before WrestleMania 35 this year. And that I kind of just came about the day of, and Ring of Honor was the first real, I was a fan of WWE, I was a fan of TNA, and then I was a fan of Ring of Honor as a teenager growing up discovering wrestling. And to see the transformation of this company as a fan, and then all the times that I've gone to their live events, and to finally walk down that aisle and know that I'm on the other side of the guardrails now, and standing in front of the crowd, knowing that it was being filmed it was a dark match, but it was being filmed for their YouTube channel, and that was a tremendous experience. And then not only that, but the fact that I got to go back a few months later in Lowell, Massachusetts with Thrill Ride, that was also a totally surreal moment to me. We were at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium this time. While the first appearance was was in the dark match, this was on the main card, and it felt like kind of the merging of two worlds in a way, because the act between myself and Thrill Ride, our alliance that we had been fostering in Northeast Wrestling, we brought it to the center stage of ROH in front of that audience, that new audience that hadn't seen us before. And there were a few people in the crowd that did recognize us that night, but it was just a great feeling to take it to another promotion in front of a new audience and just be ourselves. So it's really one of the reasons that 2019 has been such a special year for me in wrestling. I've had so many memories that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. Even if my career could end tomorrow, and I still have so much that I thought that as recently as 3 years ago, I never could have imagined.
Well, it is very, very timely that we're talking about kind of the end of the year. We're at December right now, and 2020 is just around the corner. You've got a lot of amazing moments that happened in 2019. what are you looking forward to, both I guess personally and professionally, for the year 2020?
Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to preserving my spine. Hopefully, 2020 will bring less choke slams from people like Kaz XL, because that pretty much became the story of my summer in 2019. So staying on my feet and off my back would be the top priority. But as we move forward into the new year, what I'm really looking forward to is the fact that, so many people talk about New Year's and resolutions and fresh starts and new beginnings and all those things. And to me, this whole trust fund reset, which is kind of what I'm going through right now, finding out what's next for me in my career as far as partnerships, as far as alliances and new assets, as I like to call, it's a great opportunity for that fresh start, to reinvent myself, reinvent my brand. And I'm looking forward to finding my next alliance, my next guy, or my next guys. Maybe it's several people. I think that it's great that I'm kind of entering the new year with a clean slate to write the next chapter of my book, and I'm looking forward to new dynamics. And kind of like I talked about how Wrecking Ball and Thrill Ride in the past have forced me to challenge myself in different ways and showcase different aspects of my personality. I'm hoping to experience those similar challenges positively next year in 2020 as we move forward, and hoping to continue to be a part of some major matches and some major programs, both in Northeast Wrestling and all across the wrestling landscape. I mean, I got to do some special things this year for sure, working an extended series of matches with Thrill Ride, managing him against Kaz XL, accompanied by Enzo throughout the Northeast Wrestling Under the Stars tour, which included a main event at the Norwich show, which, I mean, that was a super cool experience as well. So sky's the limit for me as far as I'm concerned. I'm hungry. I'm ready to show people that I'm committed to staying in that spotlight and continuing to grow and seize those opportunities. And I'm excited to see what 2020 is going to throw my way, because I love the fact that I have no idea at this moment.
Well, one thing that we know is that we loved having you on today. We can't thank you enough for doing this. And obviously, please come back anytime. And we wish you the best. I know that it's easy to love to hate you sometimes. But again, it was really fun to get to know Jared Silberkleit a little bit better today. And, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. You've actually been very appreciative and polite, considering that I bought my way onto your show without really going through the proper negotiation channels that I'm sure most of your other guests do. But I definitely enjoyed my time. I'd say it was money well spent, and I would greatly welcome the opportunity to purchase more airtime and come back in the future.
Well, absolutely. And I was going to say, if there's ever a need for a podcaster or two in the trust fund, just let us know. All right.
All right. I kind of like that. I think we might have to rename the show to Trust Fund Talk.
Hey, that sounds great. New year, new us.
Yeah, we'll get you a nice new blazer. I mean, not as nice as mine, of course.
Of course.
But we'll up your wardrobe a little bit, help you become a little bit more trust fund approved. Credo too. Credo knows what I'm talking about.
All right. Well, we thank you so much, Jared, and have a great new year. And we're looking forward to seeing you in Northeast Wrestling again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you. And it won't just be a great new year. It will be trust fund approved.